Japanese internment camps of World War II forced Japanese Americans into unknown camps with thousands of other people. U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt felt unsafe, and the compromise was to place Japanese Americans on the West Coast into several different camps. This created a conflict between the U.S. government and the Japanese Americans. The fight from the Japanese Americans left a legacy, showing other groups in the situation to speak out.
Is Mabel Toshiko with Terada. It's now Nishizaki. I'm 86 years old. We were in camp for it could be more than 3 years, but anyway, let's say it's 3 plus.
At the time of her internment, she was only 7 years old. Along with her, over 100,000 Japanese Americans were relocated to a total of 12 internment camps on the West Coast. World War II had been raging in Europe for a full year. In fear of the advancing Japanese forces over the Marshall Islands, the Americans moved their fleet to the California coast. America felt threatened since communications to foreign countries had been disrupted due to Japanese forces intercepting any radio transmissions they would have tried to send. Japan desired to establish more control over the Asia-Pacific region, including the Filipino-American territories, while also looking for allies in their conquest. Tensions rose on September 27, 1940, when Germany and Italy allied with the Japanese, forming the Tripartite Pact. U.S. forces took precaution, as at the same time they were expanding their own navy. Vietnam was soon overrun by Japanese forces, and at the same time, America halted their import of oil to Japan because of the Asian conquest. This slowed Japanese war efforts and angered them, leading to the Pearl Harbor bombing on December 7, 1942, forcing the U.S. to participate in the global conflict. Looking to move forward, all the Japanese military leaders strategized to neutralize the American forces by bombing U.S. Hawaiian Naval Base, Pearl Harbor. 18 of the 96 anchored ships sunk that day. President Franklin D. Roosevelt that same day declared war against the Empire of Japan.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
In a short period of 5 months, rumors circled the U.S. of a Japanese attack, but they all turned out to be false. There was absolutely no evidence of sabotage or espionage, but nonetheless it may have influenced the president even more. Relaying information wasn't easy at the time, so getting concrete facts was difficult. By February 19, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed to relocate all those with Japanese heritage into the internment camps, because the American people felt unsafe and endangered. Signs like these were posted in community boards. Families would take buses and trains to the camps. Those who refused would be forcibly taken away by the military. Within a matter of days, the Japanese Americans had to pack their belongings and leave their homes. In the camps, people would be organized into barracks with a small but essential variety of services available to them, such as the barbershop, dining halls, dentistry, animal farms, stores, medical centers, and orphanages. Their lives continued inside the camps, working at jobs and taking care of their families, but trapped, and now unable to leave. These services were considered to be subpar and conflicts between the War Relocation Authority were common. Barracks were filled with families in single-room apartments. One light would hang from the ceiling, one wood stove was provided for each family, and mattresses made of hay would cover the room. There was a complete lack of privacy in the animal stalls they lived in, as so were someone to say something in a loud voice, the stall over could easily hear. Running water was not available in the barracks, and they would have to walk to another building to take showers, use the toilet, and wash their clothes.
We weren't supposed to go outside the gate, or you'd have been shot.
Camps began to cultivate their own fruits, vegetables, and animals as food shortages became ever so common as the war raged on. A bias was often set aside for doctors and nurses who'd oftentimes receive healthier and better foods. Twice a day, they'd be counted and searched for cameras and radios. Guard towers with spotlights and machine guns surrounded the area, and without access to the administrative office, motor pool, or warehouses which were located off campus. There was never any sort of reaction from the majority of Americans. No marches and no protests. One figure, John DeWitt, a military general, had wanted to put Japanese Americans into camps since the beginning of the war, but only because of personal matters. It was completely unjust to segregate the Japanese into camps they were not allowed to leave. If they tried, they would have been shot on sight. Basic human rights were violated based on the people's fear and discrimination. Everyone who was put into the camps lost opportunities that they would have been able to access before their internment. The government noticed an impact on the Japanese community immediately, and a select few were released. Among these people were first-generation farmers and students. Soon after they let go, there was a major problem. Thousands of kids were discriminated against in schools. The University of Nebraska accepted Japanese Americans, but they would face heavy suspicion and racism. One student stated, "All of us have tried to avoid being seen as conspicuous groups and have tried to spread out as much as possible." Negative psychological effects also riddled the lives of the Japanese Americans during their internment. Pure shock from being removed from their homes and living in subpar conditions. Those in the camps often felt helpless, repeating the phrase, "Shikata ga nai," or "it can't be helped." Conflict was also found between the Japanese Americans and the War Relocation Authority, often arguing about the distribution of camp resources, leadership positions, and well-being. Children in the developing stages were particularly susceptible to the negative psychological effects of the harsh environment. The government treated them as traitors, causing children to have feelings of shame, depression, and regret, even though they were in no way responsible for the conflict or their peers' internment. Lives before and after the camps were drastically different. Often after being released, those interned would be too old to restart their careers, forcing them to rely on their children. Loss of purpose was an extreme case for some, after release driving them to commit suicide. In the terror of the camps, a small few did come out reporting benefits. At the camps, they were able to use their resourcefulness to make furniture and artwork from lumber and natural materials. Interestingly, they were able to keep beauty from their bleak surroundings. Strong friendships were built throughout the Japanese American community, creating buffers for the harsh conditions. One woman reported having more free time, able to pursue flower arrangement, calligraphy, and woodcarving. The internment of Japanese Americans was an act of fear and discrimination based on the American suspicions of espionage. The Empire of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor forced the USA to participate in the war, and Japanese Americans were labeled as spies erroneously. For 4 years, they were interned in camps with subpar conditions and were not allowed to leave. The event left an effect on Japanese Americans, scarring some and building strong ties in the community today. And it showed other groups in this situation to speak out.